perception that that this was, the U.S. or the government of Iraq usually pays at least 70 and sometimes all of the cost of this foreign military equipment, and so they're essentially paying their own way in most of this foreign military sales at this stage. I think early in our relationship, they were paying more. Let me just give me a moment here, and I'll put my fingers on it here.
General, you may want to make clear that you're not talking about munitions and weapons. You're talking about non-weapon type equipment.
Yeah, sir, it's really kind of varies. So in this case, those items that I was talking about, some of those do include weapons. So that was kind of foreign military sales. I think to date I have a number here that says that the government of Iraq has implemented $6.2 billion in foreign military sales case, and you can imagine how many U.S. jobs that kind of translates to in our industrial base. Let me see what else I have here. Yeah. So some of these things we have transferred, like we've transferred some M113 armored personnel carriers, which were excess to the U.S. Army's needs. We've transferred those to the government of Iraq, and so really a win-win situation for everybody, because these M113s were sitting out in the middle of the desert at Sierra Army Depot in Nevada, unused, and so the Iraqi Army asked for them, and they paid the money to have them brought to a serviceable condition and then transported to Iraq. And so you can imagine how many jobs that generated in our depots, and then shortly we'll start fueling these M113s to the Iraqis, and so it's a win-win situation for both of us.
So those were actually shipped from Nevada, from the U.S. to Iraq, you said?
Yeah, this was so the M113 is the word I use is venerable. That was it's a Vietnam era armored personnel carrier which had kind of outlived its usefulness, was in the middle of the desert because that was the cheapest place for us to put it, and then we declared it excess to our needs, and the Iraqis asked for it and then paid for it to be brought to a serviceable condition and transported to Iraq for their use.
Okay, well, that's obviously an unusual case. But about these 25,000 items that we've turned over to the government of Iraq, I mean, yeah, those include machine guns and tanks.
I mean, I think you're right. Most of that is non-lethal kinds of stuff. It's mostly vehicles, communications equipment, forklifts, that type of thing. I'm not specifically aware that there are weapons inside of that, although there could be. I don't have the specific knowledge with me.
Weren't there tanks as part of this?
They have bought tanks. In fact, they have bought 140 M1A1 tanks, and they actually just bought those outright.
And those were the ones that were in theater, or they bought new ones?
Yeah, no, well, I don't know. I don't think they were new, but they were, they purchased them.
The thing that confused me is, I mean, I'm used to foreign military sales being for new equipment that government purchases. So what I didn't understand was when you guys turned over your various tanks or armed personnel carriers or Humvees or machine guns, what have you, whether they paid for those or not.
Yeah.
You ones that had been property of the Army had been used.
Right. There's a number of different ways we can do this. They can either buy new, or if we declare something excess, like we did with those M113s, they still have to. We don't have the. Congress requires us, them to pay the cost of the maintenance and the transportation. And they did the same with the some howitzers as well, and so we had some howitzers that were excess to our needs, and they paid the cost to bring them up to a serviceable condition and then to transport them. Now, they're buying some new stuff too, though, so they're buying, you probably read in the paper, they're going to buy 18 F-16 jets. They're buying 35-meter patrol boats, really nice. My aide is a Navy lieutenant, and we took a tour of one of their 35-millimeter patrol boats. You walk up in the cockpit, it's like the bridge of the Enterprise. It's just push button, and it's frankly very nice. So it's kind of a mixture. So I think they're being very, frankly, frugal in what they buy, and they're very deliberate in what they buy. And so in some cases, these patrol boats, which they're going to use to protect their offshore offshore oil platforms, they are sparing no expense. And then in other things where they can get a used armored personnel carrier or a used howitzer, they're going that direction.
But of those 25,000 pieces of equipment that you discussed, what was the value of those, and how much did the government of Iraq pay for them?
Let me see if I have that. Yeah, I do not have that piece of data. I will tell you, I talked about earlier I talked about the foreign excess personal property, and I need to distinguish that from these 25,000. These 25,000 pieces of equipment are ones that they've either bought or that we declared excess and they were transferred to them. Then there's this other program called the Foreign Excess Personal Property. That is the program under which we've been granted specific authority by the Office of Secretary of Defense to transfer certain items which are not cost efficient to bring back to the United States. And we've transferred, let me see if I have that number, 3.4 million of those kinds of items to the government of Iraq. Each one of those cases, it has to be a duly constituted representative of the government of Iraq, so it just can't be somebody that walks in.
And you can estimate the value of those 3.4 million items?
No, I don't have that number, sir. I thought I did, but I don't.
You got that, Dan?
I'm giving up, yes.
Roger that. All right. Well, with that said, it's been a very, very great roundtable today. If you have any closing comments, you can go with those now.
Well, first I want to thank you for your interest in your U.S. military. It's really kind of an exciting time to be at it. So it's a huge challenge, as I mentioned in the earlier part of this thing. We've still got about 22 sites that we need to transfer responsibly. We're going to do that. We're on track. It's a difficult environment. Just for today, for example, we're having a fairly significant sandstorm blowing out front, and so you can imagine how difficult it is to conduct a convoy in those kinds of conditions. So our plan has to be flexible enough to account for bad weather, enemy activity, and then to get everybody safely out of Iraq in accordance with the 2008 security agreement. And while we're doing all of that, it's really our intent to be responsible stewards. And I give this talk a lot about responsible stewardship everywhere I go. And so being a responsible steward means that we account for this equipment that the U.S. government has entrusted to us and make sure we do the smart thing with it in terms of its disposition. It means giving back these bases in as good or better condition than we found them. It means making sure that we protect all the classified material, because you can imagine in the course of 8 years, we've generated a huge amount of classified material. And then finally, and this is a topic I wish we had more time for, it means responsibly descoping the hundreds of contracts that we have that support us. And so, you don't want any more folks that work in the dining facility than you absolutely need to feed the service members that come through there. But on the other hand, you want everybody to get their corn dog and their apple and stuff like that. So it's really a kind of a balancing act to make sure that we don't have any more capability than we need. And so, again, gentlemen, I thank you for your interest, and I look forward to our next engagement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you to everybody on the line. Today's program will be available online at dodlive.mil, where you'll be able to access a story based on today's call, along with source documents such as the audio file and a print transcript. Again, thank you to everybody on the line, and this concludes today's event. Feel free to disconnect at this time.